Good evening. This is Donna Blumquist, librarian at the LaSalle Public Library. Welcome to tonight's program, No Shrinking Violet. Before we begin, just a few reminders. On Thursday, September 28th at 6 p.m. Central Time, the library will virtually host historian Leslie Goddard for her presentation on the classic girl detective Nancy Drew. On Saturday, October 7th at 11 a.m. until 2 p.m., the library will host NASA Solar System ambassadors Joel Napper and Scott Pelican at Catlin Park in Ottawa to celebrate and get ready for the upcoming annular eclipse and the 2024 total solar eclipse. This is a packed program filled with daytime astronomy, solar viewing safety information, and details specifically related to viewing the two eclipses in Illinois. Eclipse glasses will be distributed at the event. And on Tuesday, October 10th at 6 p.m., the library will host radio enthusiast Steve Darnall for an in-person presentation about horror and mystery during the golden age of radio. All library programming is free and open to the public. It is also shareable, so please feel free to pass the information on to others. And as always, we have a short survey. We'd really appreciate it if you would complete it. Now we welcome author Jack Bales. Jack?
Hi, everybody. Let me share my screen. Oh, there we go. Let me share my screen and let me click on the right thing here. Here we go. And let me share this here and let me get to my slide. So there we go. Hello, Donna, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I look forward to giving my talk on Violet Popovich and the Chicago Cubs She Shot for Love. It's a great story. It's filled with true crime intrigue, and it's got lots of good contemporary photographs. A little bit about me, and I'll talk about me in a little bit too. I'm from Aurora, Illinois, my hometown, and I was a librarian in Illinois for at Eureka College and also my alma mater, Illinois College in Jacksonville. And I came here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, as you can see on the screen here in 1980. Was a reference librarian for 40 years and 1 month, retired in August 1 of 2020. And I still get back to Aurora. I see my family, most of them are based in Aurora, and I was telling Donna that I have a twin brother, and we like to go through Utica, LaSalle County. I like to stop at the Historical Society there and go on to Starved Rock and have lunch and everything. So I'm very, very familiar with LaSalle County and everything. And I'm just very pleased to be here. Okay, so we can get started here. Let me start out with September 20th, 1932. The Cubs had just clinched the National League pennant with a record of 90 wins and 64 losses and 4 games in front of the second place Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, the Chicago Tribune was rather stunned by this accomplishment, as the Cubs had to deal with quite a few major setbacks. Early on, it was thought that they needed some help in the pitching department. But Lon Warnke, who had been a rookie in 1931, won 22 games that year and lost just 6. So that was a really big help. And the mighty slugger Hack Wilson, if you know much about Cubs history, Hack Wilson was a tremendous slugger back in the 1930s. But as some people said, he looked like a beer keg and was not entirely unfamiliar with its contents, if you get my drift. And that was a problem with Hack Wilson, but he still was a great slugger. But Johnny Moore stepped up and he hit 305 that year. And the Tribune reported in this article here, quote, that never before was a team beset with more irritating experiences apart from the playing of baseball. And I'll get into this too. There was the obvious bad blood between the Cubs president, William Veeck, who is the father of Bill Veeck, the showman, and the team's talented but thoroughly disagreeable manager, Rogers Hornsby. The Sporting News pointed out that the Cubs season provided them, as you can see here, with a succession of varied thrills. And tops on the list of both the Tribune and the Sporting News was the July 6th shooting of their star shortstop, Billy Jurgis, in, as the Sporting News puts it here, an episode of Unrequited Love. Okay, now the sensational shooting of a popular baseball player by his former lover, Violet Popovich, immediately captured the public's attention, and everyone wanted to know exactly what had happened in room 509 of uh, the Carlos Hotel on Chicago's north side, right, just a few blocks from Wrigley Field. In just a few hours after reporters first heard the news, Chicago's Daily Illustrated Times was on the newsstand with a banner headline, as you can see here, as was the Chicago Daily News. And by the way, see this Daily News's headline here. The entire headline with the second part in smaller type says, Bill Jurgis star Cub is shot, and it says girl wounded in hotel mystery, both will live, excuse me. In the Daily Times, it says Bill Jurgis shot, and below that on the right, which I could not fit on the page, was by spurned cabaret girl. So it's all pretty dramatic. And the Associated Press carried the news across the country, reporting that, quote, a woman scorned almost took the life of Bill Jurgis, star shortstop in the Chicago National Baseball Club. Okay, so now I might be wondering, what led me to this story? And as I said, I grew up outside Chicago in Aurora, Illinois. That's me in the Cubs shirt. And I've enjoyed researching and writing for many years. And after finishing several books about literary figures, mostly for academic publishers, I wanted to try something different. And after learning that little had been written about the Cubs' early years, before they were called the Cubs, I immersed myself in newspaper articles, memoirs, documents, and other original sources. And I told this story in this book here. And while researching in my Cubs book, I read about the shooting incident in a few Cubs histories, but not much at all had been written about it. And the authors just gave a little bit of information, not much in great detail at all. And I thought that shooting made the whole Cubs season particularly dramatic. I set out to find additional details about this dramatic confrontation in room 509 in Chicago's Hotel Carlos, which, by the way, is still standing. And there's Billy and there's Violet. And there, of course, is my book. Now, information about Billy's life seemed readily available, but what about Violet's background? What about her childhood? What about her family? What did she do after the shooting, after newspapers kind of like went on to other stories? And that's what I set out to find, and I did find it. And of course, what happened to the Cubs and the rest of their series, the 1932 season, which was made even more dramatic by Babe Ruth's dramatic so-called called shot in the 1932 World Series. And slowly the details begin to emerge here. For example, the Chicago History Museum has the records of the Ulick Children's Home in Chicago, where Violet and her brothers had to stay because of after their parents got divorced, because of their father's lack of child support and lack of emotional support, for that matter. In fact, I came across a letter here at the Chicago History Museum about this place, about Ulick Children's Home, and it said that one of Violet's brothers, was told that his father wanted to take him home and have him live with him, and he refused, saying that the Ulick Children's Home was the only home he had ever really known. Talk about a stab to the father there. And newspaper articles. I went through scads of newspaper articles, and some of these, in fact, these Chicago papers were not available online. So I got stacks and stacks of microfilm and went through them page by page by page. It took me about 4 years working on weekends during my vacations and everything, camped out at a microfilm reader, going through this stuff, because they have some good online sources, but not for the years that I wanted, and the Chicago papers I wanted. No, the Chicago Tribune I did get online, but not the rest of them. And anyway, they provided great day-by-day coverage, interviews with Billy, Violet, and a few other people, such as the baseball players that found Billy in his hotel room. Chicago court records, as you can see here, were invaluable, as they offered a lot of information about Violet's parents and their very, very bitter divorce. In fact, 8-year-old Violet had to testify at the divorce hearing. I was also able to interview and correspond with Billy's family, his grandson and his daughter, and also Violet's 2 nephews. I emailed, corresponded, talked to them as well. So it's all been a great deal of fun. So today, I want to talk about the shooting of Billy by his former girlfriend. I want to talk about the court hearing, which is a big part of my book. I love that, the court hearing there. I'll talk about Violet's early life, including her rather unhappy years. I can kind of see why she well, I can't see why she did what she did, but I can kind of see that all she wanted was a happy family. I'll profile Billy's life, profile the Cubs, and along the way, I'll sum everything up. And along the way, I'm going to show you some marvelous photographs, I think, uh, which are in my book. And in my book has a lot more than just these photographs as well, including a lot of them that were never published. So, okay. So on July 1, 1932, the Chicago Cubs were in first place in the National League, and they were in the thick of a tight pennant race. And a player who was contributing to the Cubs' success was 24-year-old Cubs shortstop Billy Jurgis. Well, 21-year-old Violet Popovich, whose stage name was Violet Valley, she would put a stop to this just a few days later. Billy and a few other Cubs players were staying at the Hotel Carlos, just a couple of blocks north of Wrigley Field on Sheffield Avenue. And on the morning of July 6th, Billy was getting ready for a game with the Philadelphia Phillies that afternoon. And the Cubs were now in third place in the National League, 3 games behind the Pirates. And about 9:45 in the morning, Violet called him from her room, 111, and said she wanted to see him. And he told her to, come on up. And about 10:15 in the morning, she knocked on his door, room 509, and his room was right in the upper right there, the top floor, the upper right. How do I know that? I corresponded with a guy who went in the Hotel Carlos back before it was renovated. He sent me a photograph of room 509 on the door, and he went into that room and sent me some photographs. And he said, "This is where it is, Jack." And so that was great to know. Now, they had been going out for about a year, but he had recently called things off, and they had a great big argument. He wanted to concentrate on baseball. They had the big pennant race, and plus, he was a single guy in Chicago, and he had lots of things to do in Chicago. He kind of wanted to, have a good time. She wanted to talk about it, and they just argued some more. So she asked him for a glass of water, and he left the room to get it. So this, as I say, was a bad career move on Billy's part. While he was getting it, she pulled a small caliber handgun from her purse, and the New York Times wrote that he made, quote, "a wild lunge for the gun," and unquote. And in the ensuing struggle, as they say in the movies, 3 shots rang out. So one bullet struck him in the right side, bounced off his shoulder, and went out that way. The other the second shot grazed the little finger of his left hand. The third shot hit Violet at the base of her thumb and went up her arm about 6 inches. As luck would have it, the Cubs team physician was there in the hotel, and he treated them both. And preliminarily, he treated them both, and they went off to a local hospital. By the way, these photographs are all original. Most of these are all, except for the ones of Violet that her nephew gave me. A lot of these are all original wire photographs that I picked up here and there. In fact, I've got 3 copies of this one here. This one is not in my book. I think it's more than a little intrusive, so I did not include this one in my book. But anyway, the Chicago newspapers, of course, pounced on this story. And as they say nowadays, it went viral. And yeah, okay. It was also somewhat sensational. Violet was called in the papers the dark-haired former chorus girl, the pretty gun-toter, the 21-year-old comely brunette, and my favorite, the, quote, the raven tressed beauty, unquote. Photographers, as you can see here, even barged into her hospital room to take photographs. The caption of this photograph was, "Violet dislikes cameras," unquote. And then added a note below the caption that, quote, "Bill Jurgis, whom she plugged, was in another room," unquote. And note her bandaged left arm there as well. Here's another wire photo I have. Note Violet's bandaged arm there. She stayed at the Illinois Masonic Hospital for a couple of days, and here she is leaving for the Bridewell Hospital, right next to the Cook County Jail. She was booked on a charge of assault with intent to kill. As I said, note that her left arm is still bandaged. In the meantime, the police searched her hotel room and found these two photographs there. They also found a note addressed to her brother in which she said, quote, "To me, life with Billy isn't worth living, but why should I leave this earth alone? I'm going to take Billy with me." No, whoa, unquote. Dramatic here, huh? She later, though, changed her mind and said that the note was a result of too much gin and that she really wanted to kill herself to, unquote, to quote, "make Billy sorry for having broken up with me," unquote. She said in an interview that when Billy was out of the room getting a glass of water, quote, "I pulled out my revolver intending to kill myself. Bill saw me and grabbed the gun. We fought for it. We really fought for it. The gun kept exploding. I didn't want to hurt him," unquote. So more dramatics here. I love this story, by the way, you all. Okay, Violet made the newspapers almost daily, particularly on July 15th, the day of her arraignment. The Chicago American said that when she entered the courtroom with her attorneys, quote, "the crowd gasped at her radiant beauty," unquote. The Daily Illustrated Times wrote that she was, quote, "a symphony in red and white with her red earrings, her red shoes, and her red striped trimmings on her white sports dress, exactly matching her shade of lipstick." By the way, this is probably my favorite photograph in the book. It's never before been published until I got it. A reporter at some paper found it in some files, and he sent me the original negative, one of those 4x4-inch block negatives in the original brown manila envelope. It's the only photograph I've ever seen of her standing like this. Note her bandaged left arm. Those are two attorneys. It's like the only full body shot I've ever seen of her. It's just what an incredible find that was. And the judge in the case, John Sabarberer, he was not only an attorney and a judge, but he was also a great political fixer, shall we say. He ran a mortuary favored by Chicago's mobsters who used its garage as a drop-off spot for bootleg liquor. In fact, you can see his name in some of the Al Capone biographies as being kind of a fixer in Chicago there. He was also a Cubs fan, and he, like Billy and like the Cubs, wanted all this just quietly go away. So Billy refused to press charges, and the judge dismissed the case. I love this photograph too. It's on the cover of my book. It's the original wire photograph. Very, very rare. And there's Violet with her two attorneys. There's some of her showgirl friends in the back there. I'll get to that in a little bit. Some of Billy's teammates are in the back. A packed courtroom there, and Billy is not blowing his nose there. He's simply hiding his face from the photographers. That's on the cover of my book, in fact. Now, this was July 15th. On July 22nd, Billy felt well enough to take the field in a game against the Pittsburgh Pirates. He played third base instead of shortstop, so he'd have less stretching to do. The Cubs lost 3-1, but as one newspaper reporter reported, Billy Jurgis, the celebrated revolver target, bowed himself back into his profession by socking a single to center. Okay, you can't make this stuff up, folks. Oh, Billy refused to sign a complaint against Violet, but she decided to capitalize on her newfound fame by signing a contract to perform under her stage name, Violet Valley, in a show called The Bear Cub Follies. And we're not talking BEAR here. She's billing herself, as you can see here, the girl who shot for love. This is at the State Congress Theater, which is a burlesque club on South State Street, in a rather seedy area known for its rundown rooming houses and hotels, dingy saloons, pool houses, and burlesque theaters. Right now it's called, it was torn down, made into a parking lot. Right now a university housing is there for students at Columbia, DePaul, and Roosevelt universities. Interestingly enough, on the same day, newspapers reported on Billy's return to the baseball field. Violet returned to the stage as a singer, and management did its part to attract an audience by booking some, quote, bear cub girls as her opening act. I love this ad. It's in my book, and I found this in the little-known Chicago Record and Examiner. This is one of those papers. I went through page by page by page, and I turned the page on microfilm, and there this was. I got a high-quality reproduction. In fact, I've seen this on T-shirts for sale. I don't know. They got the image from my homepage, I guess. They had that on there, and they made T-shirts out of it. It refers to the Bear Cub Frolics, but I really think it was called the Bear Cub Follies, as in that other ad. And I found a detailed review of the show, which I really wanted to do. I wanted to find a review of the show, and again, the Chicago Daily News was not online, but I found it on microfilm, and I found out that the degree of nudity depended upon how much clothes came off, or like that, how much applause each girl got by taking off more and more clothes. And the reviewer was a guy named Lloyd Lewis, who was a very, very well-respected editor of the Daily News. He'd written some books on Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War. One of his pals was Carl Sandburg. Adlai Stevenson was a friend of his. He lived in a house designed by his buddy, Frank Lloyd Wright, that's now an Illinois state landmark on the Des Plaines River. And he said that after the Bear Cub Girls act, which lasted an hour, Violet went out there to sing a song. He said it was not good. It was good, he said, but not particularly great, but it was good. And, it was a kind of a delightful love song of the day. And after the song ended, he wrote that the patrons expected her to take her clothes off too. No, that wasn't going down. He wrote, quote, "She merely walks off bowing. There are a few scattered hand claps. She takes another bow and then retires without a single gesture of salaciousness." Now, I asked Violet's nephew about all this, and he told me that her singing career really didn't exactly take off, and that her lack of success may have stemmed from her lack of talent. She liked to sing, he told me. That is, she tried to sing. Ouch, that must have hurt. Now, Violet had other problems too. She was soon back in the courtroom, back in Judge Sabarbaro's courtroom, after her bail bondsman, a part-time real estate broker and a full-time con man, stole her Billy Jurgis love letters, saying he wanted to publish them under the title Love Letters of a Shortstop. Instead, though, and sell copies at ballparks around the country. Instead, he really wanted to blackmail Billy, and that's how, as it turned out, and this was a scheme that did not work at all. Some policemen got her love letters back, and John Sabarbaro helped with that. And after all this was settled and Violet got her letters back, she was soon back on the stage again. And in the 1930s, she was singing sentimental love songs at this Kitty Davis cocktail lounge. She was also seeing a man named Fred Williams, shown here, who worked in the office of his father's hardware store. They applied for a marriage license. They never married, and by 1940, Violet and her mother had moved from Chicago and were living in Los Angeles. A few years ago, Violet's nephew, Mark Prescott, the son of her brother Mark, learned of my research and contacted me. He offered family photographs, interviews, personal insights, and after more research, I got more and more information, and more details emerged about the sad, strange saga of Violet Popovich. And these details provided insights into what might have led her to a decision to confront Billy in his hotel room on July 6, 1932, and pull a gun out of her purse. And by the way, I love this photograph. It's one of my favorites of her. Mark gave it to me. She looks so, kind of sweet and innocent before she went rogue, I guess, and got hooked up with Billy. But she looks like just a nice kid, and I'm sorry her life turned out the way it did. Violet's father, shown here, was Mirko Mike Popovich, was an Austrian immigrant who arrived at Ellis Island in 1907. And by the way, this photograph arrived too late for me to include it in my book. I wish I could have. But he was an electrician by trade. He moved to Chicago, and in 1910, he married a woman named Margaret Heindel, also from Austria. They had 4 children, of which Violet was the oldest, born in 1911. The marriage was not a very happy one. When Violet was only 10 days old, her father started beating his mother and giving her black and blue eyes. The couple got divorced in 1920 on the grounds of extreme and repeated cruelty. That's a quote. In fact, 8-year-old Violet had to testify at the divorce hearing, as I said. Child support was very slow in coming, even though Mike had a good job. And a few years later, Margaret was forced to put her kids at the Ulick Children's Home, run by the Lutheran Church, as I said. Violet disliked living at the orphanage. And in 1926, shortly before her 15th birthday, she told the administrator she was 18 and wanted to leave. Apparently, no one verified her age because she went back and lived with her mother. 4 months later, Violet probably regretted moving back because she ran away from home after her mother punished her for going out to the movies with a boy and staying out late. The police found her, and Violet consequently made her first appearance in the Chicago Daily Tribune. Violet said in interviews that she was married at a young age, but that it was a very short marriage. I was unhappily married at 18, she said, one of those puppy love affairs with a schoolboy. I never lived with him, and we were divorced 6 months later. Right after her divorce, she enrolled in a dancing school, and by early 1930, she joined the chorus of a Chicago production of Vanities, which is a very, very well-known production at the time, run by Earl Carroll, a New Yorker who was famous. His shows were famous for their scantily clad showgirls. He was called it America's Greatest Review, and the small letters in the on the left photograph say, which was his motto, through these portals pass the most beautiful girls in the world. This was in 1930. In 1931, she met Billy. As she said in an interview, Bill is a boy and 100,000 for me. I met him at a party. If it wasn't love at first sight, it was just about second. And then, of course, a year later than that, in 1932, they had their dramatic meeting at the Hotel Carlos. She sang at the burlesque show, sang in nightclubs, and eventually moved to LA, as I said. Okay, we'll continue with Violet, but let's get back to Billy and the Cubs for a while. Here are the team's infielders, Woody English, Billy Herman, Charlie Grimm, Smiling Stan Hack, they called him for obvious reasons, and there's Billy in the far right. As I said, Billy rejoined the team on July 22nd, and after their loss to Pittsburgh that day, they found themselves 3.5 games behind the Pittsburgh Pirates. And everyone was under a lot of stress. And on top of that, there were all these whispered comments within the Cubs organization about this obvious animosity between the Cubs president, William Beck, and their thoroughly disagreeable manager, Rogers Hornsby. Now, William Beck believed that the team was easily good enough to win the National League pennant. He was pretty darn sick and tired of Rogers Hornsby complaining about how lousy the team was and how they didn't work hard, et cetera, et cetera. The players, too, had very little use for Rogers Hornsby. Second baseman and future Hall of Famer Billy Herman once said, quote, he was one of the greatest hitters that ever lived, perhaps the greatest, but he never talked hitting to us. He just expected you to go up there and do it. Things continued to get worse. A loss to the Brooklyn Dodgers on August 2nd put them 5 games behind the Pittsburgh Pirates. That evening, Beck fired Hornsby, and they appointed as manager the very popular first baseman and team captain Charlie Grimm, also called Jolly Charlie, as you can see there on the book, on the top of his dust jacket of his book. And he thoroughly lived up to that nickname because the team flourished under his easygoing style. You know, Billy Herman said there are no rules, no curfew. He ran the game on the field, but away from it, he was just one happy-go-lucky guy. Now, club president William Beck was concerned about Billy's recovery. So, and there was also the loss of player manager Rogers Hornsby. So Beck brought in infielder Mark Koenig to help out as shortstop. He used to play for the Yankees. He proved to be an excellent choice, and he helped the Cubs clinch the National League pennant on September 20th. But all in all, it was a rather tough season for the Cubs. It was just one thing after another, wrote the Chicago Daily Tribune. They had the dismissal of Hornsby, the shooting of William Beck, And also there were these unfounded charges of gambling among the players, which wasn't true. But through it all, the Cubs managed to prevail, due in large part to Mark Koenig. I know he played in 33 games, but in those 33 games, from August 14th to the end of the season, September 25th, he hit 353. So he did a really good job. Now, each team would get a chance to vote on the World Series gate receipts, their bonus money, so to speak, and the players got to vote on how much each person got. And it had to be unanimous, though. But two players, Billy Herman and Billy Jurges, voted to give Mark Koenig only a half share because he played in only 33 games. There were 154 games total. Mark Koenig played in 33, about 21%. Of those 154, Billy, for example, played in 115 for about 75%. But Mark Koenig helped him win the pennant. He did a really good job. And the New York Yankees, Koenig's former team and Chicago's World Series opponents, they didn't see it that way. When the newspapers announced the World Series breakdown of money, the Yankees, and Babe Ruth especially, blasted the Cubs as cheapskates and penny pinchers. He says, I hope we beat them in 4 straight, Babe Ruth said. They're chiselers, and I tell them so. They gave Koenig a sour deal on his player's cut. Well, as former Washington Post sports writer Shirley Popovich said, quote, the Cubs' stinginess inspired the Yankees to new heights. And the Cubs were down 2-0 in the World Series when Game 3 was played in Chicago. And all these insults were flying back and forth. And in the 5th inning of Game 3, played in Chicago, the score was tied 4-4, and Ruth was at the plate facing pitcher Charlie Root. And Charlie Root was really a tough guy. The count was at 2 balls and 2 strikes, and Babe Ruth raised 2 fingers of his right hand. And did he gesture contemptuously to the Cubs in the third base dugout, or to pitcher Charlie Root, or did he point to the center field as if to signal that he was going to hit a home run? That is, did he, as they say, call his shot? What person saw depended upon where they were sitting and the angle of the view. Even the home movie is taken at that time, which came to light, just a few years ago. They really were of little help. In any case, Babe Ruth did indeed hit a home run. Hit the wrong way. Babe Ruth did hit a home run. Lou Gehrig followed that with a home run of his own, and the Cubs lost that game 7-5, and the following game as well. They lost all 4 games in the World Series, just as Babe Ruth had hoped, and the Cubs didn't even win one single game. Now, of course, whether or not Babe Ruth called his shot has been debated ever since October 1, 1932, and I cover this quite a bit in my book. And by the way, and I thought this was interesting, opinions about whether he did call his shot do not fall along partisan lines. I have Cubs players saying, of course he pointed. I have Yankees say, oh, we didn't point. We just knew it was a good story, and we let it ride for all these years. And Guy Bush was Babe Ruth's principal heckler, too. Reporters picked up on it after Joe Williams of the New York World Telegram, said Ruth calls his shot, as you can see here in the lower right. And that's the term call the shot probably originated right over here. According to the hard-nosed Charlie Root, though, he said that if Ruth had tried to slow him up by pointing to where he was going to hit the ball, quote, anybody who knows me knows that Babe Ruth would have ended up on his ass, unquote. Charlie Root, by the way, brooked no interference on this topic. He was offered a contract to play himself in the movie The Babe Ruth Story. He was offered a lot of money, too, and he turned it down, saying, quote, not if you're going to show him pointing. And by the way, I love this story, and Charlie Root's biographer told me this. During a Root family outing one day, everyone was playing wiffle ball, and good old Charlie Root was pitching, and Charlie Root Jr.'s wife, Charlie Root's daughter-in-law, was at bat. She made the mistake of lifting up her wiffle ball bat and pointing to the center field. Bad move. Old Charlie whipped his hand up there and threw the ball as hard as he could, and he hit her right on the neck with it, knocking her to the ground. Don't mess with Charlie Root on that topic. And the whole subject bothered him, rankled him his entire life. Right before he died, he told his daughter, "I gave my whole life to baseball, but I'll be remembered for something that never happened." Uh, Cub players such as Cubs infielder Woody English felt the same way. But, does any of it really matter? Only Babe Ruth himself and his extraordinary power and his charismatic presence could have transformed a few minutes of baseball to the stuff of American legend. Even Charlie Grimm, the Cubs captain, said, "A great guy hit that homer, the greatest slugger of all time." After Bonnett shot Billy, he remarked, "I guess I'll remain a bachelor all of my life." He soon changed his name, though, and on June 28th, 1933, in Reading, Pennsylvania, he married Mary Hoyt of nearby Birdsboro. I discuss the rest of Billy's career in my book, including his rather disastrous 1959 and 1960 seasons as manager of the Boston Red Sox. As Billy said, quote, "When you become a manager, you have to have a team that is coming up. All my players on the Red Sox were finishing up their careers, and there was not much that I could do here." One of these players was a mighty left fielder, Ted Williams, who in fact retired in 1960 and couldn't help Billy much. He and Billy got along really, really well, though, for they were both hardworking and they really did their best to help the team. And Billy did his best, but he was let go in June 1960 with a real disappointing major league managerial record of only 59 wins and 60 losses and a winning percentage of just .484. Those of you who are baseball experts out there know that he did enter baseball history in July '59 when infielder Pumpsie Green became the first African American to play for the Red Sox, thereby completing the integration of all major league teams. Billy finished his career as a very well-respected baseball scout and also as an instructor, helping young players learn new baseball skills and techniques, and also instilling in them his intense drive and passion for the game. Two players who credited Billy with helping them were two future Hall of Famers, Eddie Matthews, third baseman of the Boston Braves, and Harmon Killebrew, who was a slugger for the Minnesota Twins. Okay, now Billy quit. Keep an eye on the time here. Billy quit the baseball life in the early 1980s to take care of his ailing wife, Mary, who died in '84. Several years later, he did remarry, and as he put it, he and his wife, Phyllis, enjoyed the good life in Largo, Florida. They travel, socialize, and visit with other teammates at baseball functions. Billy was not a powerful hitter, but he compensated for that with his solid defensive skills. He was in the major leagues for 17 years, from 1931 to 1947. In 4 years, 1932, 35, 37, and 39, he led the National League shortstops in fielding percentage. That is the percentage of times a player properly handles a batter or thrown ball. He led the National League in 1935 in completing double plays. He batted .258 in 1,816 games, and he got 1,613 hits. He was with the Cubs from 1931 to 1938. Then he was with the New York Giants, and then back to the Cubs to finish out his career from 1946 to 1947. He always said, "I always try to do my best, whether I'm with the Cubs or Giants." He said, "Baseball has done well by me," he said, "and I've done all I could for baseball." He was diagnosed with cancer in 1991. He entered the hospital early 1997 and died a few weeks later on March 3rd at age 88. I asked Billy's daughter whether she knew. I asked her if she knew that about Old Violet, and whether she shot her father. And she said, quote, "It was never mentioned Oh, she said she was familiar with the incident, but that it was never mentioned and mentioned while she was growing up. And she said, quote, "It was never mentioned in our house, never." Whoops, going the wrong way here. I love these photographs. Let's go back to Violet here. By 1940, Violet and her mother had moved from Chicago and settled in Los Angeles. Violet always considered herself a professional singer and had these photographs made to kind of like promote herself as a singer. I love the one of the shorts and the cape there. Unfortunately, despite all these glamour shots, she never really launched a singing career on the West Coast here. Now, Violet was a city person, and her 1947 marriage to the prize fighter Charlie Retzlaff, a prize fighter from Duluth, Minnesota, probably was doomed from the beginning. He was known as the Duluth Dynamiter and was regarded as a good fighter too, until he met a young boxer in 1936 who knocked him out in the first round. That probably was not surprising since that young boxer was Joe Louis, who a year later would be crowned the world heavyweight, champion. The marriage to Charlie Retzlaff did not last long, but they did not divorce. They remained friends. And her nephew, Mark Prescott, told me that they spent Thanksgiving with Mark and his family in 1962, where Violet cheerfully announced at the dinner table that she and Charlie had sunbathed nude that day. And Mark told me that, quote, "That comment caused quite a stir. Charlie was very embarrassed. My father blew up and words went flying." Now, Violet was very gregarious, but certainly not at a loss for male companionship. She once caught the eye of motion picture star John Wayne, who struck up a conversation with her at a cocktail lounge near where she worked at the color film department of Paramount Studios, and he drove her home. She told her nephew, who told me, that he had high hopes of getting comfortable and staying for a while. Let me phrase this, that, John Wayne did not take his marriage vows too seriously, let me put it that way. And he had hopes of getting comfortable and staying a while, but alas for old John, Violet's mother was waiting up for her, and that kind of went, those hopes were kind of dashed right then and there. Violet dated baseball player Leo Drozier in the 1930s, who later became manager of the Chicago Cubs back in the 1969 famous Cubs then, and also Al Lopez in the 1930s and later in the 1960s. In fact, Mark Prescott went to a game with Violet and they saw and talked with Al Lopez. In fact, if you have friends who say they are baseball experts, I bet they can't answer this question, and please ask them that. What former showgirl went out with two Hall of Famers who were both managers of the two Chicago professional baseball teams? Not at that time, of course, but what former showgirl went out with two Hall of Famers who later were managers of two Chicago professional baseball teams? Violet's nephews share with me stories about their aunt. One of them remarked that, quote, "Violet was easygoing and upbeat. She was sociable. She struck me as a very normal person. I had no idea that she had shot the 1932 Cubs shortstop." Violet spent her final years as a nursing home. She did not have much money, but she regaled the staff with stories of her showgirl past. And she was upbeat, great attitude, cheerful spirits. She died on February 25th, 2000, was buried in Los Angeles' Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. Just like Billy, she was 88 when she died. Now, I talk in my book that, like Violet, the Hotel Carlos had its share of tough times. Over the years, the residential hotel gradually fell into disrepair. Look at the air conditioner at the upper left there, the left photograph. This looks like it's falling apart. Look at that trim underneath it. Right below on the lower right of the door, it looks like the trim's all coming off over there. This name was later changed to the Sheffield House Hotel. You can see that, that sign right above the awning there. It says Sheffield House Hotel, that cheap looking sign. The building always, though, retained that imposing stone entryway with Hotel Carlos on it. Now, this was one of those single room occupancy hotels. Urban gentrification took over, and the Sheffield and other rooms like it were either torn down or repurposed. I go into this in my book. A real estate company purchased the hotel, remodeled it, really did a good job remodeling, I guess. And here's what it now looks like. A friend of mine took this picture a few years ago and also just went on inside and took the picture there down the corridor. And Billy's room is still there in the upper right. In fact, the team's the management company's homepage says they called it a once hip apartment hotel for Cubs players. It's now called the 3834 North Sheffield, which not particularly original, I don't think. It's just the address. Just two more things. In 1949, 19-year-old Chicagoan Ruth Ann Steinhagen, to quote the New York Times, who had to quote the New York Times, a twisted fascination, unquote, with former Cub and then Philadelphia Philly Eddie Waitkus, shot him in his hotel room at the Chicago's Bridgewater Hotel in 1949. And Waitkus and Jurgis had played together for 2 years, and Waitkus had hit a double in Billy's last game on September 9th, 1947. This was in 1949 when Eddie got shot. And I can't help but think, they knew each other. They had to have gotten together and compared notes. Hey, Eddie, how was it when you got shot? This is what happened to me, etc. They had to have. Now, Arthur Bernard Malibin never mentioned where he got his source material. And I researched this quite a bit, but it seems likely that one or both of these shootings inspired him to include a passage in his 1952 novel, The Natural, in which a woman shoots ball player Roy Hobbs. And The Natural and that scene continue to live on today, thanks to the hit 1984 motion picture starring Robert Redford. I'm sure he had it based upon one or both of the shootings. And by the way, Ruth Steinhagen died in 2012, and I've researched this a great deal too. Her death went unnoticed by about 2 weeks, but for about 2 weeks before reporters noticed it. I've got all sorts of photographs about Ruth and of Ruth at the courtroom and everything else. I tracked her down, got her address, got a picture of her house, got her phone number. I never called her up, but I did write her letters asking her if I could interview her, and she never responded to my letters. I even offered her money, but she never responded. In fact, that was the response that Eddie Waitkus' biographer had too, he told me. Now, one more question needs to be addressed. And you're probably thinking that, did Violet really intend to kill Billy when she burst into his room? Remember, she left a note saying, I'm going to take Billy with me. But after the shooting, she said, no, I lied. I only wanted to kill myself to make Billy sorry for having broken up with me. Well, she lied. Mark Prescott said that she had confided to his mother about his sister-in-law that she had indeed gone to that hotel room with the express purpose of pulling that gun out of her purse and bam, shooting Billy Jurgis for having broken up with her. As she told his mother, quote, I was very angry at Billy and I wanted to kill him. Here's my book with a foreword by Tim Wiles, the former research director at the Baseball Hall of Fame. Note my email address here. I had book plates. Here what a book plate looks like. These are self-adhesive with the image of the book on it. I had these made that feature the cover of the book. So if anyone buys a book and wants me to send them a booklet with a nice inscription on it, with a real long inscription too, I'd be happy to do that for free, no cost. Just email me there at that email address, jbales@umw.edu. That stands for University of Mary Washington, where I went. And I'd be happy to send you a signed bookplate, inscribed the way you inscribe to whomever you want. Be a great Christmas present. Christmas not too far away. A little bit of shameless promoting here. Let me end this something on a light note. I've enjoyed all this research a great deal. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Donna and Donna's daughter, Rachel, for setting all this up. I appreciate them and their enthusiasm. They made me look good. And thank you both very much. I had a great time immersing myself in all this original source material, over probably 1,000 documents I've looked at. And some years ago, I decided to even make Violet part of my family Christmas card with my son and my daughter. In fact, when I told the Cubs historian, who's a good friend of mine, official historian Ed Hardig, he emailed me, said, "No, Jack, no, get out of the microfilm, go take a walk." In fact, Ed was at one of these. I did a session at the Brookfield Public Library, and Ed was there, and I told him this story, and he stood up and said, "I still have this Christmas card." But anyway, they were on my Christmas card, and here it is, right there. Violet, my 2 kids, and me. And note the bandage on Violet's arm, and on it says, "Violet, I hope you feel better soon. Go Cubs, Jack." Thank you very much.
That is wonderful, Jack.
Thank
What a
you.
great story. And extremely creative.
Thank you very much, Donna.
It
Had
was
a great
fun.
time.
I'm sure you enjoyed doing that. Let's see. Do we have anything in the chat? I don't think so. Fun stuff. It absolutely is. I am so glad that you featured your book for people to see it and say that it would be a great gift, because I think it would be too. I read it. I loved it.
Thank you,
Donna. And I'm not even a baseball fan. So it was a lot of fun. I think that we can certainly put your email and contact information in the notes that we will have available for everybody who registered for the program.
By all
so
means,
if they want to take you up on on the book plate, that would be great. And also, if anybody has any questions that come to mind after we close the Zoom link, we will make sure that those are routed on to you. We're hoping to have Jack back with us for spring training in February. So keep tuned to the programming at the LaSalle Public Library, because we'd like to have more about baseball. So I think that is about it. I don't see anything there now. And so I will say, Jack, I'll turn it back over to you for closing comments.
Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in. I had a great time. And again, just shoot me an email if you want a book plate, and I answer all my emails. I'm retired now, and I love doing this stuff. I hike a lot, and I like to do baseball research. I've got a great life. I have 2 great kids, and this has just all been a lot of fun. You know, it's been so much fun. I try not to take my good fortune for granted. And again, Donna, thanks to you and Rachel. You know, you all made me look good, so I really appreciate that. So I want to applaud you. And applaud all you all for tuning in too. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Jack. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And for now, we'll say good night.
Great. Good. Thank you, everybody, again. Goodbye.